Well, I'm so excited about this training session here in Surrey, and I hope you're looking forward to it. As we learn over the next 8 weeks, I have a couple things that I really hope will be happening as you process the material. I think you'll be processing it at several different levels. The first is you're going to be learning kind of this from a classroom academic, thinking about how will I teach this. I want to make sure I remember that illustration, so you'll be doing that. But then I think as you hear the material, my hope is that you'll be processing some of your own childhood stuff. And you'll be thinking about some of your wounds, some of your trauma, how all of that has affected you going into your adult life. And I just want to let you know up front that at times will probably be quite intense and maybe feel a bit overwhelming. But it's, to me, such an important piece for you to go through, because for a client, when they meet somebody who's going to be their teacher, they have this radar that can tell if you're just talking out of your head, like out of a textbook, or whether you've really gone through the work yourself. And if you haven't gone through the work yourself, they just don't listen to you or have respect for you. And so if they know you've gone through the work, then they're going to really say, okay, I want to listen to this person because they know what I'm going through and they've dealt with their stuff. But there's a third thing that many people will be going through, and that is you'll be thinking about yourself as a parent. And you'll be thinking of the ways you've caused trauma in your own children, and that can be intense as well and can create a lot of guilt. But it can also be a positive, because for some of you, you're going to be thinking just from a little different angle. And that'll help make you a better teacher, so you won't be just teaching it from what you went through. You'll be looking at it from different angles as well. So that's my hope for you as we go through these 8 weeks. Let me just say why REACT was started. Most treatment centers across Canada and the U.S. focus on helping people with addiction, and that means dealing with their relapse warning signs, their relapse triggers. And what I have found over the years is a lot of people, when they come into recovery, they're sitting in detox, they've hit a bottom, and their thinking goes, all I need to do is learn how to control my using, and then all my problems will be gone. In other words, my addiction is the cause of all my problems. And sadly, what begins to happen is they go to a treatment center, they learn about relapse warning signs, triggers, and they think they're good. They go back out into life, a job, family, and they begin to realize, I still have all my problems. And so 10, 15 years ago, Dr. Gabor Mate from Vancouver, East Hastings Street, began to say and put out there that in his experience, pretty well everybody that was an addict had childhood trauma. And what he was really saying was addiction isn't the real problem. It was actually seen as a solution to other problems. So let's find out what those underlying problems are. And then we can begin to really deal with the real issue, the issue that using was trying to solve. And so the research that has happened over the last 10 years has really confirmed what Dr. Mate was saying, which is underlying complex trauma is the issue. So the recent data says 97% of addicts have complex trauma. And what we mean by complex trauma is that the child grew up in an ongoing environment where they didn't feel safe. They felt in danger. That can happen because of being in an abusive family or a bully at school. And so they are always walking on eggshells, always on guard, always in fear of getting hurt. And that was the obvious way of complex trauma being kind of experienced by a child. But as the research developed, we began to realize that many children feel trauma or lack of safety if they go through some type of abandonment. So it could be put into a foster family. It could be a parent dies or somebody close to them dies and they feel abandoned. It can be parents getting a divorce and then feeling abandoned by that. And all of this is based on the child's perception of these things. much of the research has begun to focus on a child experienced neglect. So parents are there in the room, or parents are meeting their physical needs, but their emotional needs aren't being met. Parents aren't emotionally available to the children, and so that can happen because of busy lives. That can happen because parents are wrapped up in their own addictions or mental health issues. And so the result is, whenever a child's basic emotional needs aren't met, a child doesn't feel safe. They're always in danger or fear of being hurt. And so that is complex trauma. And it is my experience over the last 15 years that yes, 97% of addicts come from complex trauma. And so my desire is to help people deal with that trauma, because if they don't, they just never get over the need to have drugs or alcohol. An important way to understand complex trauma is that it sends a child into fight, flight, or freeze. So they go into survival mode. So I'm in danger, so I'm going to fight back. But if I'm too little to do that, then maybe I'll flee, I'll run away. And if I'm too little to do that, I'll just freeze and shut down and try not to feel anything. And that is the response of a person to trauma: fight, flight, or freeze. What is important to understand is that when a child begins to resort to fight, flight, or freeze, in their mind, they've found the perfect way to cope with danger, to cope with life. So they stop growing, which means they stop learning healthy tools for coping, for relationships, because in their mind, they have come to understand the perfect tool for dealing with the problems of life. That's what people have. And once they found drugs and alcohol, that confirmed in their mind they had found the perfect tool for dealing with life. So they stopped growing. And so for a person to get over complex trauma, there's 5 different things that need to take place. And it's important to understand that it takes 1 to 5 years for a person to really begin to deal with this stuff and change. And that's why REACT is very different from most treatment centers, because as we deal with this stuff, we recognize up front 28-day program's not going to do it. A 60-day program's not going to do it. These people need to be in long-term places where these 5 things happen. So number 1, they need education. They need to understand how complex trauma influenced them. They need to understand their own coping patterns. So self-awareness. And then they need to learn new tools for coping, new tools for relationships. And then the second piece is they need therapy. And that means there's some deep wounds that need to be healed. They need cry. They need to be able to grieve. They need to go through experiencing some of this pain so that they can heal. And that is an important part. And most treatment centers are very afraid of taking people there. And I want you to know that we're not going to take people to pain until we give them the tools to deal with that pain. So that's the third thing. A person needs tools, but that involves a healthy support network. Dr. Gabor Mate cites research done from the BC area where they followed different addicts after treatment. And what they found is that 0% stayed clean and sober if they didn't have a healthy support network. And what that means for most addicts is they're going to need to build a surrogate family. They don't have any natural, healthy support networks. Their families are toxic. Their past relationships are toxic. And so recovery for them, and what we do is help them build a surrogate family. And then thirdly, they need some good, healthy one-on-one relationships, some good friendships, because that's where healing begins to go to deeper levels. And so they're going to need help in building those kind of friendships. And then the fifth thing is they are going to need to have the tools to deal with triggers. So what has happened for many people in treatment, they're in a safety bubble. They don't get triggered. They are in a safe place. And then they go back to work, back to their family. They're triggered left and right, and they relapse because they don't have the tools or support to deal with that stuff. And so what we want to do at React is have a day program so they'll still deal with life stuff while they're here. That means they're going to get triggered, which means they're going to come back and say, I got triggered, and we're going to teach them tools. We're going to give them support. And through that, they are going to grow, and that is such an important thing. Now, the part of the problem is when they're triggered, they go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. And so we're going to be really staying close to them so that they can implement the tools that they are learning. Now, I want to focus on two very important concepts in order to really understand what React is about. So the first is understanding the emotional age of our clients, and the second is a term called reparenting. So the first one, this emotional age. So when a person started fight, flight, freeze as their main way of coping, they stopped growing emotionally. They stopped growing as far as learning healthy tools for dealing with life and relationships. And so they might be in a 40-year-old body, but they are in a state of being like 10 years old emotionally, because that's where they started fight, flight, freeze. And so what we are doing is understanding they might be 40 years old, but really they have the toolkit of a 10-year-old. And that's where we're meeting them. And so our role is parents. We are going to try to reparent people who didn't get healthy parenting growing up. And that is key for you to understand. And so what does a healthy parent do? They meet their child's physical needs, emotional needs, relational needs, intellectual needs, spiritual needs. That is what we are about. So bio, psycho, social, spiritual. And so they are looking to us to be their surrogate parents. And that is a heavy responsibility. But if you are a parent, you know that some parts of meeting a child's needs are exciting and fun, and you feel really connected to them. But there's other parts of meeting their needs where we're teaching them tools that seem very boring, mundane. We teach them to tie their shoes. We teach them to make their bed. We teach them to cook. And they make a mess of the kitchen. But we're okay with that because we realize it takes a while to learn how to use a mixer and those things. So a lot of the stuff we do as parents is meeting very mundane needs. But we know if we don't meet those needs, the child won't let us meet other needs because they won't trust us. They won't feel safe with us. So we have to be able to meet a broad range of needs. And then beyond that, every child has a different love language. Some feel loved if they can talk about their feelings. Others feel loved if you just give them a hug and snuggle with them. Others feel loved if you do activities with them. Every child is a little bit different. And so if we're going to be effective as parents, we need to get our children. We need to understand what makes them tick, what makes them feel loved. We need to get to know them so that we can meet even deeper needs more effectively. And that is our role as a parent. And therefore, in the role of counseling and helping these people. Now, I want to go on a little bit of a tangent here, and I don't want to overdo it. But I know that most of you come from a Christian perspective, and your desire is that people come to know Jesus. And that is an honorable thing. But I think I want you to see it in terms of parenting. Because I have dealt with hundreds and hundreds of people who have had Christian parents. And their parents have put all their focus on the child's spiritual needs to the neglect of getting the kid and meeting their emotional needs and meeting some of their physical needs, just trying to get them to believe in Jesus. And those are the kids that rebel against Jesus because the parents didn't get them. The parents didn't care about their world. And so what I think is important to understand is that our role is, yes, we're about meeting spiritual needs, but they need to know that we care about their physical needs, their emotional needs, their intellectual needs. And if they don't get that we really care about those needs in equal priority as the spiritual, we will actually turn them off. And like I said, I've seen it amongst even my own relatives. I've seen it amongst hundreds of clients who have been turned off because the priority was to the spiritual and the neglect of getting the child and caring about all of their needs. But I also understand another element. I have talked to many parents who have decided to be stay-at-home moms, and they clean snotty noses, they cook meals, they clean up after kids, they teach kids to tie their shoes, and it's so mundane and boring, and often they feel like they're wasting their potential. And they go, I have so much to offer. I want to be out there reaching the world. I just feel like it's such a waste of time to be at home doing these mundane things with their kids. And part of getting their kids and meeting their needs is one kid wants to have a tea party. And so they got to have a tea party with their kid. And they go, this is boring. I do not enjoy it. Another kid wants to make a fort and climb a tree. And they got to do that stuff. And they go, I wish I could be out there helping people come to know Jesus. But what you realize as a parent, you're in for the long haul. And as you faithfully have tea parties and clean snotty noses and do all of those things, the child feels loved and accepted, and then they want to know about the Jesus that is so important to you. And so part of our role at React is to do the mundane with the clients, to get to know them, to meet them where they're at, so that they feel loved for who they are and accepted for who they are. Teaching them tools, helping them heal from wounds, letting them talk about all kinds of things. And you know what I've seen happen as I have done that with hundreds of clients? They feel loved and cared for, and all of a sudden they want to know about the spiritual part of life that is a passion in my own heart. And so we have to be aware that we're parents, surrogate parents, and we need to be meeting all of those needs. Now let me go back to React. Why do we have phase 1 and phase 2 and eventually a phase 3? Phase 1 is the 4 weeks, and what we do in that phase is give a more academic piece. We try to not go into all of the emotions too much. And so in that academic piece, we give them an overview of addiction, triggers, relapse prevention, and we give them an overview of complex trauma and the 60 characteristics of complex trauma. We just want them to get the big picture. And part of what we're doing in phase 1 is weeding out the people that aren't super serious. Because when we get to phase 2, we want people who want to go into dealing with their trauma. And that means they got to be sincere, super serious. So phase 1 kind of weeds out the people who are doing half-hearted recovery. Then we want them to understand that recovery is not just not using. So the person that sits in detox and says, all my problems are due to my addiction, we want to push them to pass that, to realize there's underlying issues. And if I don't deal with them, I will never get healthy, have healthy relationships, good relationships with my kids, and probably won't stay clean and sober. So that's what we want to do in phase 1. Some will go into phase one all gung-ho and say, yes, I want this, I want this. And then as they get a clear picture of their issues, they'll say, I'm not that serious. And they'll leave. And that's okay. We've planted a seed, and hopefully they'll come back when they get to a deeper level of pain. Phase two, we go into the deeper stuff. And this can get really heavy. It'll stir up for most clients on a weekly basis. Flashbacks, pain, all kinds of different things that make them very uncomfortable. But it'll also lead them to a place where they go, okay, I see and understand how my past affected me and how unhealthy I am. And I see all of my unhealthy patterns. Now give me healthy tools and help me know what healthy looks like. And so we spend the first part of each week in phase two looking at the past and how it affected them and all their unhealthy patterns. And then the second half of the week, we go, okay, what does healthy look like and what are healthy tools, so that they can leave the week feeling, I've learned something very practical, and they can go out and apply it. So what you're going to find as we work in phase two with clients, even in phase one, is we work at two different levels. So at one level, we're looking at their past, helping them understand that, so they get greater self-awareness. We're going to validate their wounds so that they can heal. But then they're going to be dealing with the current day stuff. So as they go home and they deal with their kids or with a partner or with parents and get triggered, that's going to cause all kinds of things to happen. And so what you're going to find is the current day triggers are going to tie them back into memories and the old past stuff. And it'll lead to the deeper issues. So often in phase two, as I deal with clients, I don't try every week to take them back to some memory from the past. All I do is just let them live life as they go home. And they'll come back and they'll say, I was triggered last night. And that'll take us to an underlying issue. And that'll lead to growth. And it is a really neat thing to watch. And so there's going to be all kinds of just working with them in the present, because they need to understand self-awareness, but it'll keep taking them back to the past. Okay, the next 8 weeks, I just want to end with this. There are going to be some days that you're going to find very heavy. As I talk about stuff, as you go through stuff, even in phase one stuff. So be prepared for some flashbacks. Be prepared for some very painful emotions to get stirred up. We're going to use some of our time together to help you process your stuff. I don't want you just sitting learning. I want you healing and growing yourself. And so we're going to try to make time to do that. And I'm going to make myself available to do some counseling with you if you're really needing to process some of your past. What I think is very important to understand is, please, over the next 8 weeks, work hard to make good self-care. And what I mean by good self-care is that you take care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually. So you are going to find on many days you're going to go home exhausted. And you're going to be exhausted emotionally, but that's going to affect you spiritually. And so you're going to need to take care of yourself. Usually you're going to need somebody, a friend, a partner, that you can talk to about what's happening inside of you. And so as you begin this journey, it's going to be your own journey that you're then going to work on yourself, but then you're going to be leading others on their journey. And so I hope you will find, like I have found over the years, this is one of the most privileged jobs that I know in the world. To be able to reparent people, to see the growth, to see the positive results that happen in their life is so exciting and so rewarding, but it can be very exhausting as well. So take care of yourself. Thank you and all the best.